Hey everybody, Mike Naso from IPR365.com here with the hurricane tracking map, and I literally had to dust this off to give you some idea of what we have out there. You can see in the Atlantic we have one hurricane, and off the page we actually have a tropical storm, and that's Earl. This is Hurricane Danielle, and you can see the most of the Atlantic is void of tropical activity. However, both of these systems are going to have indirect and perhaps, especially with Earl, direct landfall threats. So let's take a look at an easier map to look at than what I have here, and I'll explain what's going on in the tropics. Alright, now I gave Hurricane Danielle top billing for this update because obviously it's the strongest system out there and it's right now the greatest threat to land. But Earl is hot on his trail. Here's the latest satellite imagery of the Atlantic, the visible as the sun goes down. And you can see we have two systems. There's Danielle, very evident that it's intensifying as the sun goes down. Much better defined on the western side than it was yesterday. Obviously, you remember yesterday it looked like a hurricane again. I noted, of course, it was automatically upgraded once again to a hurricane, a very quick weakening. We've seen that a lot in the past. I remember 10 years ago we had Hurricane Joyce, but Joyce never came back. Danielle did. And now that it's back, it's going to be taking this west-northwest, then northwest, then north track just to the east of Bermuda, which will put you on the weaker side of the hurricane. But warning, if it moves close to Bermuda any further west, we could be talking about a much more serious impact, even a landfall, or the worst case would be as if the eye and the eye wall goes just to your west, and then you're on the right side of the hurricane, which is the worst. You can see hot on his trail is Tropical Storm Earl, already looking well organized. Smaller, so probably more susceptible to changes up and down. I wouldn't be surprised if this cranks up very quickly to a hurricane, or even a strong hurricane, and then fluctuates and even weakens as dry air might come into play. Overall, though, it's probably not going to do much more than just steadily strengthen, and this is going to be a big player in the next few days. But let's talk about Danielle since it is our hurricane. Here's the latest as of 5 p.m. Eastern Time on Hurricane Danielle. It was at 21.2 north, 53.1 west. Winds were 85 miles per hour, gusting to 105. So, believe it or not, yesterday it was actually stronger. It got up briefly to 100 miles an hour. It's an unusual hurricane. It actually went from a moderate tropical storm to a Category 1 hurricane to a Category 2 hurricane to a Category 1, then a tropical storm. Now it's back up to a Category 1. So it's really been fluctuating. 982 millibars northwest now at 17. And it should continue that, become a Cat 2 again, maybe a major hurricane, just as it's starting to curve. And you can see Bermuda, you are in the cone of uncertainty here, pretty close to that center on this map. Of course, anywhere within this cone the hurricane can move. If it strengthens really quick, we could hope that it moves further to your east. But if it does end up kind of bumping a little bit more west and making a longer curve, then you could be in for some trouble. Right now, that's probably not the case, but here are the models, and you can see the ensembles and even the H-Wurf model kind of bend this thing back west and then eventually turn it. So there's a lot of squiggles out here, and so if you live in New England, I'd keep an eye on this one. Regardless of a landfall impact, you're going to have high swells, that goes without saying. But you can see the hurricane, by most of the models, is expected to turn. Even if it does so hastily, it still will turn, and even if it slows down, regardless of speeding up or slowing down, we're going to be dealing with high swells from this hurricane. If we take a look at Hurricane Danielle at this time, you can see the hurricane is definitely looking better organized. They're much more symmetric, and even on the IR, note here, actually this is visible, look at that at the end, this cloud blowing up. This is going to wrap all the way around the center. We're already seeing the eye starting to poke out. It's going to become a well-defined eye. The hurricane is going to get at least to 100 miles per hour, probably overnight, if this keeps up. And we're going to potentially be dealing with the first major hurricane of the Atlantic hurricane season. Now, that's not to say we won't be dealing with Earl. Okay, now as of 5 p.m., Tropical Storm Earl was at 14.4 north, 32.2 west. Winds are 40, gusting to 50. Pressure's 1,006, and it's moving straight to the west. Okay, I'm talking straight west at 16. So this thing is moving straight west. It is expected to maybe start moving north of due west by the weekend. and maybe west-northwest by early next week. But with that kind of track, the Hurricane Center's waiting to see what happens with the model guidance to see if it might be adjusted maybe a little bit further to the south. If that's the case, this one is much more of a threat for a landfall or at least an impact in the northern islands. From there, where does it go? And that's the big question. A lot of storms that get in this area here have a tendency to hit the Bahamas and Florida, because usually what happens is at this latitude, by this time there's been enough ridging to where whatever weakness there is pulling the hurricane to the north closes up and the hurricane continues west. However, you can see the model guidance the last 3 days continues to turn the system north, but what do you notice on that? Check this out. Last 3 days, turning it north at 50 west. Okay, that was 3 days ago. Yesterday, turning it north at 55 west. Today, turning it north at 65 west. Now, what's that general trend? The trend is your friend. Right now, it's gone from the models turning. Remember Ivan in 2004? It was going over Hispaniola. It was going over the Bahamas and Cuba. It was going over Florida. It ended up hitting Gulf Shores, Alabama. So when these models drop to the west like this, and the current motion stays this straight west, you begin to get worried that what if this does turn into the mid-Atlantic, or what if it doesn't turn at all? And so that right now is the fear with Earl. Now we're still talking 5, 6, 7 days from now before it would get to land masses further west, but before then, the islands, the Turks, the Caicos, and the Bahamas, you guys would have to deal with it. Bermuda, watch it close as well. Right now, Danielle is your main focus, as that's really going to be what causes the problems in your neck of the woods. Here's Tropical Storm Earl as the sun goes down. Look at this, a little eye-type feature as the center is showing up there as convection builds. It is strengthening. It could become a hurricane in the next 48 hours or even sooner than that if it builds some deep convection overnight and organizes. Right now it appears to be jogging in the north, but what actually is happening is the convection is wrapping around, and we're going to see that motion basically like that over the next couple of days, as really you can see here on the satellite Earl comes into view. And indeed, it did organize well enough, and it still is right there on the satellite imagery to become our next system. You can see the wind shear for Danielle and Earl is not that bad. Danielle is under a much favorable environment than it was yesterday, much more favorable. Earl, you can see off screen here, check this out, has its own little safe harbor over the top of it. If that continues with it, look at this. It's got its own little high-pressure anticyclone over the top of it. Look at this, 10, 5, 10. If that continues, Earl's going to have no problem strengthening. And that is really the fear with this hurricane, tropical storm, when it becomes a hurricane, that we'll have to contend with it. Also, the sea surface temperatures, they're warm, but the further west these systems get, the warmer they get. And with Earl, in Earl's case, it will likely end up right in this area here, regardless of if it turns completely safely out to sea or if it ends up heading right towards Cutler Bay, Florida. Either way, it's going to be over much warmer water, and by that time, okay, by that time it could already be a formidable hurricane, and we would have to watch it. I don't like it when we have hurricanes with well-organized cores moving into the warm waters in late August, September, because we've seen with Floyd, with Francis, with Ike, they tend to do some serious strengthening as they move west or west-northwest, even if they turn out. Of course, we saw Francis continue that devastating 140-mile-an-hour track towards Cape Canaveral. It weakened, stalled, and came in. We saw Floyd just take this monstrous near Cat 5 track right towards Miami. It turned and hit the Carolinas. And of course, we saw Ike also taking a Category 4 track right towards Florida, move west-southwest, hit Cuba, came out, and the rest is history. So what will Earl do? We probably need to keep a closer eye on Earl in the United States than Danielle at this point, if I had to say so. But keep an eye on both of them. In Bermuda, you got to keep a close eye on Danielle anyways. Here's the latest blood water vapor imagery here, as I call it, off the coast of Africa. There's our hurricane. There's our tropical storm. Could this be Fiona? Well, if you look at the Canadian model, that's a yes. Look at that. Canadian model 4 or 5 days out have Hurricane Danielle spinning out, Hurricane Earl getting swept up in the wake of it, and Fiona coming here under the radar, aiming at the Caribbean. This one would be a problem down the road for the rest of the Caribbean and probably the Gulf Coast of the United States if that were to pan out. But we got a long time to track this. But regardless, that clearly is the tropical wave that we can now see leaving Africa that the Canadian model's picking up on. A good spin with that. It is that time of year, my friends. Here we come with the hurricanes. Speaking of hurricanes, Frank. Good old Frank finally became a hurricane, and thankfully it moved away from the coast. High swells, 75 miles an hour, at 17.0 north, 106.3 west. Gusting to 90. It could strengthen a little bit, probably not above 90 miles an hour. It's moving west-northwest at 12, 987 millibars. It took that track from the Gulf of Tehuantepec all the way out. It's going to curve back towards land, but it's probably going to be weak. But you could see the remnants of it impact the Baja here over the next couple of days if that indeed pans out. There's the visible throughout the day of Hurricane Frank trying to maybe pop out a little eye there. I don't know. Take a look at that. A little bit of a, drum roll there trying to wrap around an eye. We'll see what happens with Frank. Regardless, it's heading out to sea, and if it does curve back, it's probably not going to be much when it does. So that'll do it for the Tropical Update. I'm Mike Naso from IPR. I'll see you next time with more on Hurricane Danielle, Tropical Storm Earl, Hurricane Frank, and whatever else comes down the road.